I guess it all started like one of those fairy tale relationships you read about in magazines. You know, the kind where everything feels perfect and you're so in love that you can't imagine anything ever going wrong. That was Emily and me. We met at a cafe downtown, and honestly, I think I noticed her first. It felt like we both clicked right away. But it wasn't that usual rush to figure each other out. We just spent hours talking about everything. Life, dreams, politics, you name it. She had this energy that you couldn't help but catch, and I was hooked from the moment we started talking. Felt like we could talk forever. We went on trips, did the little things, like late-night drives or sitting around at a cafe for hours, just enjoying each other's company. Life felt like everything I wanted. I was working my way up the corporate ladder fast, earning bigger paychecks, getting noticed at the company. But with all that success came more time away from home, longer hours at the office. At first, I thought it wouldn't be a problem. I was working hard for us, for our future. I kept telling Emily it would pay off soon. But the more I threw myself into work, the more she started pulling away. Emily wasn't the kind of woman who demanded attention all the time. She was independent, smart, and beautiful. But over time, I started noticing that she seemed distant. She wasn't the same person who laughed at my dumb jokes or looked at me like I was the only man in the room. I'd come home late, completely drained, and she wouldn't say much. She'd just be glued to her phone, scrolling through whatever nonsense was on her feed. Every time I tried to ask about her day, every time I tried to talk, she'd give me that same excuse. "I'm too tired, please understand." I did understand, but here's the thing. It started to feel like I was just the guy who came home and filled up space. Work took all my time and she was being left behind. Maybe that's why she started spending more time with Olivia. Olivia was one of her closest friends. Always there, offering advice, and helping her out when she needed it. They'd have these long conversations, but I never thought much about it. Emily and I had been married for over 10 years, and I knew relationships changed over time. But I never thought it would get like this. It wasn't until I started picking up on little things that I began to get suspicious. Olivia had always been there, sure. But lately, her advice started feeling different. It wasn't just "you're too good for this, Emily," or "you deserve better." That's when things began to shift. Olivia had this way of planting doubts, making Emily feel like she was entitled to more than what she had. And it worked. Slowly, Emily started to believe it. I started hearing more and more about how lonely she felt, how I wasn't giving her what she needed. Then came Ethan. She started texting him. At first, it seemed harmless, just casual work talk. They were in the same industry, so it made sense. But then those messages started turning personal. She'd come home from work, and I'd find her on the couch, her phone in her hand, texting away. She'd tell me about their random conversations, but there was this strange excitement in her voice when she spoke about him. I tried to ignore it, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And then it hit me. She was looking at me less and less. Our conversations became few and far between, and when we did talk, they felt empty. But Ethan? He was always there, ready to listen. She opened up to him in ways I hadn't seen in years. She told him about how lonely she was, how she wasn't getting the attention she needed from me. It was hard to deny the truth. She was getting something from him that I wasn't offering. One night, I was working late again. When I finally got home, the place was quiet. Emily was on her phone, texting away. I tried to start a conversation, but she just mumbled something about being tired. She didn't even look up from her screen. That night, I went to bed alone, and I felt it harder than I should have. I knew it. I could feel it deep down. My wife, my best friend, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was slipping away. But I didn't want to face it. Not yet. I had a gut feeling, but I wasn't ready to believe it. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about those messages. About the way her voice lit up when she talked about her casual chats with Ethan. She'd smile at her phone, like she was sharing a secret with someone who really understood her. I should have said something. I should have confronted her. But I didn't. I kept pretending everything was fine, that it was just some phase she was going through. But here's the thing about pretending. It catches up with you. I could see her pulling away more each day. And the worst part? I didn't want to admit it, but I was scared. Scared to confront her. Scared of what I might find. I didn't want to believe she could cheat on me. I didn't want to believe someone else could give her what I wasn't. But every time I walked through that door and saw her on the couch, phone in hand, I felt it. The space growing between us. Something was changing. Something was slipping away. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who overreacts or gets paranoid. But damn it, I felt it in my gut. Emily, the woman I had built my life with, was slipping away. And the worst part? I didn't even know when it started. Maybe it had been happening for a while. Maybe Olivia had been right all along. I wasn't sure. But one thing was clear, things were changing. And I didn't know if I was ready for what was coming. I don't know when exactly it happened, the moment I fully started to doubt her. But looking back, I think I knew long before I finally admitted it. It wasn't just that Emily had become distant. It was the small things, the way she avoided my eyes when I asked about her day, or how she started making excuses not to spend time with me. I tried to convince myself it was just work stress or a rough patch. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe I was overreacting, reading too much into the small stuff. But then, it started happening more often. The quiet dinners where she'd just zone out, glued to her phone, the nights she'd go to bed early, claiming she was too tired while I stayed up alone, feeling like a complete stranger in my own home. It wasn't just a lack of affection. It was a complete shift in how she treated me. And the more I thought about it, the worse it felt. One evening, after yet another excuse from her about not wanting to spend time together, something in me just snapped. I'd been patient, giving her space, trying to respect whatever she was going through. But this wasn't about space anymore. It was about trust. And if she was going to shut me out like that, I wasn't going to sit around in the dark anymore. I knew it wasn't right. I knew it would hurt. But I couldn't stop myself. She was in the bathroom, and I saw her phone sitting there on the kitchen counter. My heart was racing as I picked it up and unlocked it. I told myself I wasn't going to go through all her stuff. Just a quick peek. Just to see if there was something, anything, that could explain the way she'd been pulling away. And then I found it. The messages between her and Ethan. They started off so casual, so innocent. A little work talk here, a harmless comment there. But the more I scrolled, the more intimate they became. We should grab coffee sometime. Turned into, I miss talking to you. And then, I really needed someone to listen tonight. And then the one that hit me like a gut punch. I can't stop thinking about you. My stomach twisted into knots, and I honestly felt like I was going to throw up. The anger and pain surged through me, and it felt like I couldn't breathe. All those times I'd tried to be patient, tried to understand, and she was getting closer to him. But what really tore me apart was the realization that she wasn't just talking to him. She was building something with him. It wasn't just loneliness, it was something else. She had already made her choice. I closed her phone and sat there in the kitchen, trying to catch my breath, trying to process it all. I didn't let the anger take over. Not yet, anyway. No, I wasn't going to let her see me fall apart. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I wasn't going to let her win like that. Instead, I decided to be smart. I wasn't just going to let my marriage implode without making sure Ethan felt the consequences too. I wasn't going to be the only one picking up the broken pieces. If I was going down, so was he. I called Dylan the next morning. Dylan was a guy I trusted. We'd worked together for a few years, and although we weren't in the same department, I knew he could dig up some serious dirt on people. He was good at tracking down information. I gave him the bare minimum of what I suspected and asked him to look into Ethan. No hesitation from Dylan. That's why I knew I could rely on him. Just a couple of hours later, I got the call. Ethan wasn't some single guy, he was married. His wife was named Hannah, and they had 2 kids. A whole damn family. My blood boiled. I felt like I had been hit with a ton of bricks. Emily wasn't just cheating with some random guy. She was ripping apart 2 families at once. I had everything I needed now. I didn't need to second-guess myself anymore. I wasn't just going to sit back and accept this betrayal. No way. This wasn't just about me anymore. I was going to tear his life apart just like he'd done to mine. I put my plan into action. I knew revealing the affair to his wife wouldn't just ruin Ethan. It would make him feel the weight of what he'd done every time he saw his family. I wanted him to never feel safe again. But there was something else I had to do first. I had to wait. I had to stay calm and be in control. So, I watched from the sidelines as Emily sank deeper into this relationship with Ethan. The messages kept coming, and soon there were plans to meet up, trips, outings, the whole thing. I wasn't blind to it. Every time she left for one of those work meetings, I felt this sick knot in my stomach. I stayed behind, pacing the house, wondering if I should follow her, wondering if I should just do something. But I didn't. Not yet. I was in control. I wasn't going to make the same mistakes. I was going to outsmart her. But then, something strange started to happen. Despite everything she was doing with Ethan, despite her planning a future with him that didn't involve me, I could see that something was bothering her. She wasn't as carefree as she used to be. There was this sadness in her eyes, this weariness, like she was losing herself. She was losing herself, even as she tried to replace me with him. Every time I saw her looking at her phone, the excitement was gone. She was still involved with him, still making plans, but I could tell she was starting to have doubts. The spark that was there in the beginning was fading. I could feel it like a shift in the air. She was physically pulling away, but emotionally, she was starting to question Ethan too. Maybe part of me felt sorry for her. But most of all, I felt furious. She made this choice. She burned everything down. And now, she was left with nothing but the wreckage. I'd spent weeks sitting in silence, watching her continue her affair with Ethan. Every message, every call, every time she'd sneak off for one of those meetings, while I stayed behind, each piece of it weighed on me. But I wasn't going to let this drag on forever. I wasn't going to be the guy who let himself get trampled while the world moved on without him. No, I was done. It was time to make my move. I started gathering everything I could. Messages, photos, screenshots of their meetups. Every single piece of evidence that tied them together. I wanted it all. The more I had, the more solid my case would be. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't about to let her betrayal slide. Emily had been playing with fire, and now it was time for me to get my own back. One evening, while Emily was off on another meeting with Ethan, I knew it was time to act. I grabbed everything I had, every scrap of evidence, every message, every photo that would prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that she was cheating. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I was going to Hannah's house, Ethan's wife. She deserved to know the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. I'd never met Hannah, but I'd heard enough about her from Dylan. She was a stay-at-home mom, had 2 kids, and all the while, her husband had been lying to her. I didn't feel any remorse as I rang her doorbell. I wasn't just out to destroy Emily's life. I was taking Ethan down with her. When Hannah opened the door, she had no idea what was coming. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I handed her the stack of photos, the messages, the whole damn mess. I watched her face change as she flipped through them. First confusion, then disbelief, and then finally the crushing realization. It was slow, painfully slow. I could see her hands trembling as she tried to process what I just dropped in her lap. She asked me questions, ones I had no intention of answering. I wasn't there to comfort her. I wasn't there to make her feel better. I was there to tear everything down. Why? She whispered, barely able to speak. Because he deserves to know, I said, locking eyes with her. And so do you. You deserve to know that your husband has been screwing my wife for months. Her face went white, and she crumpled into a chair. I didn't stick around to comfort her. I left her there, stunned, trying to process the destruction. No sympathy for her, not when she'd been living in the same lie I had been. I walked out without saying another word, but inside, I felt this strange mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I wasn't sure if I was doing this for me or for her, but in the end, it didn't matter. Ethan's perfect little life was about to crash down. And as for me, I was still in the middle of my own wreckage, but I wasn't done yet. Later that night, Emily came home, looking the same as always. She had no idea everything had already been set in motion. The damage had been done, but she still hadn't realized it. I didn't speak at first. I didn't need to. I waited for her to start talking. And of course, she did. Excuses, apologies. I'm sorry, Daniel. I didn't mean for things to get this bad. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I didn't want her apology. Not after everything. Not after all the times I'd seen her slipping further and further away. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. I wasn't about to accept her lies. I don't want to hear it, I said, my voice icy. You've made your choice, Emily. And now I'm making mine. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then came the desperation. Please, Daniel. I'll do anything.
I'm sorry.
We can work this out. Just don't leave me. I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I'd spent years making excuses for her, hoping things would get better. They never did. And now, here we were, this was the end of us. I didn't wait for her to beg anymore. I stood up, walked into the other room, and started pulling out the divorce papers. It was time. I didn't care about the house, the assets, or whatever other crap she was going to throw at me. I was done with it all. I'm filing for divorce, I said, handing her the papers. It's over, Emily. You wanted this, and now you've got it. She just stood there, her face drained of color, eyes wide, staring at the papers in her hands. Daniel, please, she whispered, but it was too late. I was already 2 steps ahead. She had no clue what was coming next. I've already talked to a lawyer, I said, my voice firm. The house is being sold, and everything's in my name now. I'm taking what's mine. She didn't say anything. Her eyes welled with tears, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the nights I spent alone, the distance between us, the lies. She'd done this to herself. The next morning, I started seeing Sophie. It wasn't planned, but it felt right. Sophie had been a colleague for a while. Young, attractive, and she'd shown interest in me for some time. She'd always been supportive, even when things were tough with Emily. It started innocent enough, a coffee here and there, small conversations. But before long, I found myself looking forward to seeing her. Sophie was different. She listened, really listened, and didn't treat me like a stranger. I didn't expect it to go anywhere, but it felt good to have someone in my corner for once. Things with Emily only continued to spiral. She tried to come back, to fix things, but I could see it in her eyes. I wasn't going to forgive her. I wasn't going to fall for it again. She begged me to reconsider, but by then, I'd already made up my mind. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. I sold the house, packed up my things, and moved into a new apartment. The weight lifted off my shoulders. No more pretending. No more lies. I was free. Emily, though, she was left with nothing. She tried to salvage things with Ethan, but it was too late for that too. The damage I had done, showing Hannah everything, had destroyed whatever was left of their connection. Ethan had pulled away, and Emily was left alone, trying to piece together the wreckage of her own choices. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't about to clean up her mess. I had my own life to rebuild, and I wasn't going to let her ruin that too. As for Sophie, she was there, a steady presence, someone I could talk to without the weight of guilt or lies hanging over me. We were taking things slow, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had a real chance to move forward, to be happy. And as for Emily, she was left alone, broken and desperate, scrambling to fix the wreckage she had caused. But that wasn't my problem anymore. That was all on her. The moment the divorce papers were handed to Emily, I could see it in her eyes. Complete devastation. She wasn't surprised, but the finality of it hit her harder than she expected. Maybe she thought she could talk her way out of it, that she could keep me in the cycle of guilt, apologies, and empty promises. There was still this flicker of hope in her, this misguided belief that I'd change my mind. But I was done. Her words didn't have the same weight anymore. The woman I thought I knew had slipped away long before this. Daniel, please, she began, her voice thick with desperation. It was a mistake. We can fix this. I swear I can fix this. I know I've been distant, but we can work through it. Just give me a chance. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. The trust was gone. It wasn't just the cheating, it was everything else. The lies, the distance, the way she pushed me away when I was still trying to hold on. I had been patient, I tried to understand, but I wasn't going to keep pretending anymore. I wasn't going to be her doormat. "No, Emily," I said flatly, my voice unwavering. "It's over. I'm not going back." I could see her struggling, trying to keep herself together, but it was no use. She had already destroyed everything between us, and now she was desperately clinging to whatever she thought was left. It was pathetic. The divorce process was anything but smooth. Emily fought for everything she could: custody of the dog, the house, a chunk of our savings. But I had already made sure everything was in my name, and I wasn't going to let her have a single thing. The house was sold off quickly, and I made damn sure that she got nothing. I didn't need anything from her. I was done. I had my future to rebuild, and she had no place in it. I moved into a smaller, more modern apartment downtown. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt like a fresh start. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life again. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to tiptoe around her feelings or carry the weight of her mistakes. I was free. Emily, on the other hand, was drowning in the mess she had created. Alone for the first time in over a decade, she was finally starting to feel the consequences of her actions. The guilt began to seep in, but it wasn't enough to force her to face the truth. Instead, she tried to reconnect with Ethan. She called him, texted him, anything to hold on to the dream she had crafted. But Ethan wasn't having it. He was distant, cold. I guess he was dealing with his own demons. After Hannah found out about the affair, the fallout between him and his wife was catastrophic. He had been living a lie just like Emily and me, but now he was facing the consequences. He still had his family, his kids, and that guilt started eating him alive. Emily didn't get it. She thought she could just pick up where they left off, but Ethan was pulling away. You could see it in the way he avoided her. He was overwhelmed by the guilt of what he'd done to his wife and kids. The excitement of their affair wasn't enough to cover up the mess of his own life. They broke up. Ethan pulled the plug, and Emily was left alone again. She had nowhere to turn. The man she had been clinging to for the past few months was slipping through her fingers, and now she was left with nothing. But I wasn't the only one moving on. I spent more time with Sophie. She had been a colleague of mine for years, and though we had always kept things professional, things changed after the divorce. Sophie had always shown interest, but I had been too caught up in my marriage to notice. Now things were different. She was easy to talk to. She listened without judgment. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened. She let me vent. And over time, I started looking forward to our time together. We started meeting more often, lunches, happy hours, even weekends. I wasn't expecting anything to come from it, but there was a spark. She was kind, supportive, and for the first time in a long time I felt seen, valued, felt like something real, something worth building. Meanwhile, Emily was falling apart. She tried dating again, going out with a few guys, but it wasn't the same. They were just distractions. None of them filled the emptiness she felt. She couldn't replace what we had. She thought she could get back on her feet with someone else, but I knew better. What we had wasn't something she could just walk away from. The emotional connection we shared had been real, and no one else could replace that. I watched her struggle. She kept reaching out, asking if I was okay, trying to talk about what had happened between us. But it was over. There was nothing left to say. As for Ethan, his life was just as messy as it ever was. Hannah had torn into him when she found out about the affair. Their arguments were brutal, and it was clear their marriage was beyond repair. He was consumed with guilt, and I think that's why he started pulling away from Emily. He had no energy for another relationship, not when his whole life was falling apart. Emily was just one more complication in his broken world. For me, life was finally moving forward. Sophie and I were taking things slow, but it felt solid. Something I hadn't expected. She was everything Emily wasn't. Present, kind, and honest. She didn't make me feel like I had to fight for her affection. With Sophie, I could finally breathe. I wasn't haunted by the ghosts of my past marriage. And Emily? She kept trying to move on. But the more she tried, the more she realized that everything she had was slipping away. Ethan was gone. I was gone. And now she was stuck in the mess she created, alone. No matter how many dates she went on, no matter how many distractions she tried, she couldn't fix the one thing that really mattered, herself. It was sad, sure, but it was also reality. I had to let Emily deal with the consequences of her actions while I focused on building the life I deserved. I had come to terms with the divorce, with everything that had gone down between Emily and me, but I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I wasn't just going to walk away and let her rebuild her life while I stood by and watched. No, I wanted to take control. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done, not just to me, but in every aspect of her life. She still hadn't learned. She was stumbling through the wreckage she created, trying to pick up the pieces of a life she'd shattered, and it grated on me. I knew she was still chasing after Ethan, trying to salvage what she could. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not after everything. So I decided to play the game on my terms. I wasn't going to let her have it easy. I had a knack for technology, social media, fake profiles, all of it. I was good at blending into the background, at making my presence felt without being noticed. It wasn't hard to set up anonymous accounts, to craft messages that would hit Ethan where it hurt. I knew he was already emotionally exhausted, torn between the guilt of what he'd done to his family and the mess he'd created with Emily. He was conflicted, and all I needed to do was plant a seed of doubt. Make him question her loyalty. I wasn't subtle about it. The messages were provocative, just enough to stir up his insecurities. I implied that Emily was seeing someone else, that she was hiding things from him, just like she had done with me. I knew how paranoid and insecure Ethan was, how easy it was to get under his skin. Each message I sent pushed him further into doubt. I could feel the tension building, the chaos I had set in motion slowly taking shape. It didn't take long for Ethan to start feeling the effects. He was already on edge, already seeing Emily through a fog of doubt. I could feel the shift between them, the way he started pulling away, the way he began questioning everything she said. Emily didn't notice at first. She still thought everything was fine. But I knew better. It wouldn't be long before the truth hit her. One night it happened. Ethan confronted her. I don't know exactly what he said, but I could picture it. Emily, caught off guard, probably denying everything, trying to smooth things over with her usual excuses, the same ones she had used with me. But it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted so deeply that Ethan could never look at her the same way again. His jealousy, his insecurity, his guilt, all of it bubbled to the surface. And just like that, he ended things with her. I watched it unfold from the sidelines, detached, like I was watching someone else's story. Emily was devastated. I don't think she ever saw it coming. She thought Ethan would be her escape, the new beginning she was looking for, a way to fill the emptiness she had created. But now, she had lost me. She had lost him. And she was left with nothing but the wreckage of her own choices. It was strange. Part of me felt satisfied, like I had done what I set out to do. I had torn down her new life, left her with nothing. But at the same time, there was no real joy in it. Watching her fall apart, watching her feel the same pain I had, didn't feel like a victory. Felt like closure. The end of this whole mess. And I was done living in the past. Sophie, though, she was still there. She had been with me through all of it. Through the mess with Emily, through the aftermath of the divorce. And now, with everything crashing down around Emily, Sophie was still by my side. We were growing closer. I wasn't reacting to the past anymore. I wasn't stuck in the aftermath. With Sophie, I could breathe again. She didn't need me to be perfect. She didn't need me to be fixed. She just needed me to be me. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a chance at something real. Something worth building. Sophie and I began planning our weekends together, making time for short getaways or simple nights at home where we could just breathe together. For the first time in years, I wasn't constantly pulled back into the past. The grudges, the what-ifs, the endless cycles of doubt. None of it haunted me anymore. I was finally moving on. And Emily? She was falling apart piece by piece. It was hard to watch at times, but it didn't matter anymore. She had made her bed. I wasn't going to try and fix it for her. After losing Ethan, she tried to date again. She reached out to old friends, but it was all falling apart. She could feel the distance growing. People had started pulling away. Word had gotten out. Everyone knew what she'd done to me, to Ethan. Her social life was in ruins. She tried to fill the void with dates, casual encounters, anything to distract herself. But it didn't work. None of those connections could fill the emptiness left by what we'd shared. I saw it in her eyes. She was desperately searching for something real, something stable, but it was like trying to hold water in her hands. She couldn't replace what we'd had because she had never truly understood what we had. She was too focused on her own wants, her own desires, to see the fallout of her actions. I wasn't surprised, though. She couldn't keep running from the mess she had created. The loneliness I had felt when we were together was now her constant companion, but 10 times worse. The worst part? She didn't know how to fix it. She didn't know where to start. She couldn't rebuild what she had shattered. As for me, I had no intention of looking back. I wasn't waiting for her to figure it out. I wasn't even angry anymore. I had everything I needed now. Sophie, my new life, my freedom. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was in control. I had someone who valued me, who didn't need me to be perfect. She just wanted me, and that was enough. Emily, she had lost everything. She had destroyed everything she'd built. Now she had to watch it all fall apart. And I was just a distant spectator, detached, knowing that I had finally broken free. Emily hit rock bottom. After losing Ethan and watching her social circle crumble, she had nowhere to hide from the truth anymore. Alone and consumed by guilt, she started therapy, desperately trying to make sense of her choices and figure out how to heal. But no matter how hard she tried, the damage was done. She couldn't fix the past. Meanwhile, I was thriving. I had moved on, focused on my future with Sophie. She had become my partner, not just in the romantic sense, but in every way that mattered. Together, we were building something real. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful, grounded. Sophie wasn't asking me to fix myself. She wasn't demanding explanations or apologies. She just accepted me. And for the first time, I felt like I was truly valued. One weekend, Sophie and I took a trip to a cabin by the lake. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the water. As I sat there, I reflected on everything I had gone through. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I was building something new, something real. I realized now that closure didn't come from revenge, anger, or hanging on to old wounds. It came from letting go, from embracing the future. Emily, on the other hand, was still caught in the wreckage of her own making. She might try to rebuild, but the damage was done. She couldn't undo what she'd done to me or to herself. I had my own life to live now, and for the first time I was at peace with it. Sophie and I talked about our future, and I realized that everything I had been through had led me here. This new beginning, this chance to let go of the past. Emily's journey was hers alone to make. I had found my path, and for the first time I was free.